Welcome everyone to our webinar today about software asset management in the SAP area. And with that, your host, Francisco Hansen. I'm the Vice President in America for VOQUZ Labs. And we have a lot of guests here today coming from Singapore, coming from Warrington in the UK, coming from Phoenix in Arizona, and Rudy, you're in Holland, is that correct?
In Belgium.
In Belgium. Yeah. Sorry for that. It was almost an insult. So in Belgium. So welcome everyone. So Tony Weiss just joined our company. One like Jeremy, who has worked in the past for SAP directly and has been spending many years in the software asset management, software contract negotiations area. Very experienced people. Angle Point, Jeremy. They are designed by Gartner, determined by Gartner as the leader today in managed services around software license management, which where they have built a very interesting practice. Now, Rory Canavan in the UK, he has the SAM charter and he helped building the ISO norm about software asset management, which was an interesting work on putting methods and a structured approach on how to build software asset management. Rudy has been implementing SAP and rolling out SAP for many companies in many years. Today, working at Contractors as a strategic advisor. Before that, EY, so Ernst & Young, Bain, many different companies where he has collected experience in SAP rollouts. So he brings like the real life side on how to implement SAP. What are his experiences on that? And in the background, we have Stefan helping us with the moderation, our marketing manager. Thank you very much, Stefan.
Hi, everybody. So, welcome.
Let's have a look. First of all, before we go into the software asset management part, we would like to see what is happening today in the market with SAP. Let's start with this one. We have taken some slides talking about what is SAP doing today, how are they presenting themselves to investors, and what are they announcing? Tony, do you want to explain what we are seeing here?
I think anyone who is experienced with SAP, anyone who's engaged with SAP on a day-to-day basis, anyone on the procurement side or the IT side from SAP, from a customer perspective, will know what's happening, to be honest with you. This is a representation in visual terms that SAP is absolutely pushing for cloud revenue. So everyone would have seen, well, almost everyone would have seen a RISE offering. Everyone would have seen SuccessFactors. Everyone would have seen Ariba. Everyone would have seen Workday. Everyone would have seen, not Workday, everyone would have seen anything that SAP is pushing in the cloud area. So this is just a, as I say, a representation of that. Realistically, RISE is something that absolutely every single customer is going to hear about this year if they haven't heard about it last year. Open to hear anyone's. I mean, I have dealt with literally hundreds of customers, thousands of customers over the past few years, and all of my customers in the last year have had this RISE offering put in front of them. So I don't think this is a secret for any of us, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that's interesting. And here on this slide, another one from an investor presentation from SAP, we get additional things. So we are hearing the cloud is growing with SAP, and their ambition in 5 years, in 7 years, is to grow this business. Now, here we have one interesting answer. Increasing contract durations, multi-year contract ramp-ups. So this is something that mostly they didn't have when they are doing maintenance. You have a year-to-year contract, This is an interesting thing. So now when clients sign for a cloud product, it's not anymore a one-year contract, it is a multi-year contract. So there is security behind this investment. There is security in the revenue coming next year, the year after. But this is an interesting part. Cool. So this is RISE, and in this one, sorry for that, we only found this one in German because this was a presentation to an investor forum in Frankfurt. And here they are describing, on the right, you see the translation, what are the growth drivers? And number one is global economic growth after the COVID, so the recuperation of the market. But then number two is RISE with SAP and business process intelligence. So, Tony, what do you think, RISE with SAP? I mean, when we started listening to S/4HANA Cloud, what was it, maybe 3-4 years ago? And now we hear RISE with SAP, which is S/4HANA Cloud with infrastructure. We thought, well, nice for a small company who was doing Navision, but is this really something for all client sizes? Is this something that includes the functionality that the larger corporations need today? What do you think about that, Tony?
Well, I guess we all started hearing about this with HEC, which is more than 3 or 4 years ago now. HEC has become slightly a dirty word in SAP land, but here we are back again with RISE. I don't think there's any doubt that the RISE offering is more mature than the HEC offering was. I think that there's a lot more thought gone behind it. There's a lot more focus into it, and a lot more richness and depth to it. Realistically, though, and it's actually interesting when you ask whether or not it's for all customers. I do hear different things in different markets, and I'd be very interested to hear what Jeremy and Rudy and Roy have to think about this, because I still hear customers in certain regions being told by SAP that this is very much an SME offering, and then I go to the US, for example, and I see multi-billion-dollar companies being presented with RISE offerings as if it's almost mandatory they take them. So there's a different way of looking at this. I think the takeaway from it is that SAP will be pushing the cloud. They will be pushing RISE, and I don't think there's any doubt. As you can imagine, I have an SAP background, as people may know, so therefore I still speak to SAP ex-colleagues. I know that the sales push is very much on the cloud side. The compensation model is very much on cloud, and we all know that SAP is a sort of coin-operated organization, and the salespeople are going to sell what SAP pays them to sell. RISE is going to be that offering.
Yeah, so switching over to Phoenix, Arizona. So Jeremy, what do you have to say? Is this still an exotic thing for small companies, or do you see this really happening like most of companies going over to an offering on the cloud like RISE? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that from our perspective, the customers that we deal with, for the most part, are considered LE, so they're going to be large enterprises, usually, more than 500 million or in revenue, and we're not seeing a large uptick in the adoption of RISE. We definitely hear that they're being propositioned, right? They're being asked, hey, look, this is an option. This is something that's on the rise, and something that the sales executives would ideally like to sell. But I think that from what we see anyway, these large organizations are so complex, it's difficult for them to just boil it down to one contract and move everything over. It's much more complex than that. Some of these customers have history with SAP that go back into the 90s and late 80s, and that's a more difficult conversation, at least from what we're seeing in the market.
So what comes to my mind apart from that is 2 years ago when was it 2 years ago? I think last Sapphire in Orlando when SAP was presenting S/4HANA Cloud. That was not RISE yet, but basically they had the same idea. They were talking very much about taking care of the update cycle of everything that is basis management of SAP and also less customization. So Rudy, now coming from the real life projects, I'm worried hearing that the approach should be like less customization and also prefixed update cycles, which normally I would expect is not something that large corporations can deal with. What is your take on that? What do you see happening? Is this something preventing people to adopt RISE, or how do you see that at all, Rudy?
Well, I would say what I'm noticing a lot of companies, a lot of clients, is that there is a realignment happening, which means that still a lot of companies, rather big companies, multinationals, they still have ECC 6.0, which is largely installed on site, but they're trying to make a movement to the cloud just to give them some little bit more flexibility, meaning in integrating other cloud systems. But now that RISE is coming up, they're also thinking, well, we're rather comfortable with our ECC 6.0. We have our perpetual licenses. We're good. We don't have extra costs. So what would happen with our perpetual licenses if we move to the RISE cloud? Will they be voided, or we need to move to a subscription-based approach within the RISE cloud? So they're just a little bit scared what will happen to the bottom line, meaning their TCO. But from the other side, a lot of large companies have sat on a big pile of money the last 2 years due to COVID. So they're realigning their business. They're looking at more acquisitions. So there are a lot of M&A opportunities on the horizon. So, and that's taking that into account is that RISE could give them rather nice flexibility going to the cloud, and also easier connect to other cloud systems or other legacy systems. So there is a movement, there is a hunger to move to RISE, but the question is, what are the other large companies doing? So they're just basically looking around, what's the competition doing?
Which is a good introduction to our next issue. What can we at all be doing as clients of SAP today? Tony, explain this to us. If you are today on Business Suite 6 or 7, so on the ECC, on the traditional on-premise ABAP version of SAP, what options do you have and how should you work with those options?
Sorry, did you direct that to me, Francisco?
Yeah, sorry. I was saying, could you explain the options that clients that are on the on-premise version of SAP, so Suite 7, Suite 6, ECC, what can they do today apart from moving to S/4HANA? Is this the only option? What other options do we have there? And what is the way of treating this? How should I approach the decision on whether to migrate to S/4HANA, to RISE, to whatever?
It's an interesting question. I've yet to meet a customer who wakes up in the morning and decides to move to S/4HANA in any direction, to be perfectly honest with you. The commercial elements, the understanding of future demand, the understanding of your future landscape, the understanding of your current usage, the understanding of your leverage of SAP, the understanding, as it says on the left of this slide, on option 1, what else can you actually use other than SAP? I think should all be coming into your thought process. So yes, you can stay on premise and you can stay there until 2030 plus, and you can take, as it says on the right hand side of this, you can take a third-party support platform and you can stay on your robust ERP system, SAP ERP system for the next 7-8 years. Most customers, I don't think, will do that. I honestly believe that most customers will move to S4 in some way, shape, or form. Now, whether or not that's with continuing with the on-premise, whether it's moving to a hyperscaler, whether it's moving to a RISE offering, whether it's moving to a hybrid approach, whether it's going with some of that with best of breed in some other areas, this is the big open question, isn't it? And this is where customers are really, I wouldn't say struggling, but they're really questioning their way forward with SAP. What makes sense for our organization? So the question, Francisco, is a little bit difficult to answer because it's so multifaceted. There are so many choices that customers have. And it's just a question of getting their heads around what the options are and getting their heads around the TCO, getting their heads around what sort of customization they want in their organization. It's a very complex conversation, to be perfectly honest with you. And then, of course, once they have made the decision what they want, then they have to go out and negotiate that. Then they have to go out and get the right pricing, the right terms and conditions. So it's a relatively complex, relatively long cycle that I think customers do themselves a disservice if they don't take all of this into consideration.
Yeah. With SAP, and although SAP has been growing their functionality of their core system, like S/4HANA Cloud, so RISE with SAP has grown in functionality, it covered much more than that, but SAP has kept on acquiring more and more companies. So now we have Qualtrics, now we have the products from Ariba, we had Hybris, which is replaced now by the customer for HANA. We have many different products integrated in the whole thing. So it is SuccessFactors. It is not one single product like it was in the past on-premise, more or less integrated. Now we have different cloud platforms with different server management. And literally, I have been involved in three projects where clients were questioning, so is it SAP or is it best of breed? What do you say about that? We have here, as Gartner is explaining on this slide, the option number one is competing ERP solutions. So same as you said, Tony, I don't see clients migrating the whole system now to Oracle, which is an extreme investment, of course, the project. But the question is, will they move over HCM? Will they move over CRM? Will they move over BI, robotic process automation? So customer experience, so best of breed or SAP only? Rudy, what do you see happening with your clients today? How do they see this happening? Do they tend to have more a best of breed approach or to be a single-sided, very pure SAP infrastructure? How do you see that, Rudy?
Well, to be honest, at the moment, what's happening is that a lot of companies are really moving, like you said, to a best of breed approach. So staying the path of SAP, combining technologies, for example, changing APO to IBP, and also, how can I say it, make the supply chain more sleek. But the issue is that, how can I say it? If you look on a product basis, that is that if you go completely S/4HANA, it will impact down the road or fairly immediately, it will impact the way that you're working, meaning your working processes. And there I have a lot of requests telling that, listen, Rudy, we had some opportunity in ECC 6.0 to have a lot of customizing, and now we need to stay close to the core, meaning it impacts the manner that we used to work. We need to change our processes. And those are a lot of concerns that I have, meaning really completely adopting the best of breed approach, and also not having the possibility to have a fairly customized environment.
I get that. Yeah, and I understand, of course, what drives SAP, but as a client, you have a different perspective on things sometimes, and you are worried about having a single provider. So we talked about the S/4HANA pressure. We talked about the RISE with SAP cloud pressure. So question here is, who is driving the S/4HANA initiation? So who's bringing S/4HANA on the table? Is it IT? Is it business? Is it management? How do clients create this business case to move over to S/4HANA? Jeremy, can you explain something about that?
Yeah, from our perspective, it's IT. I mean, very rarely do we have IT people coming and saying, "Hey, look, we need something new and we need extra work to, change this stuff over." I would say that it's definitely going to be either business that is saying, "Hey, we need to do this," in conjunction with the SAP sales executives. So the sales executives are bringing it to the table and saying, "Hey, look, this is a new offering. This is something interesting," and they sell the business and say, or management in that case, "Hey, look, this is what the advantages of S/4HANA are. These are some of the efficiencies that you can gain through, faster, quicker, better technology." And then on top of that, the whole looming support coming to an end, customers don't like that, right? So this is definitely what the next options are for them. But yeah, I think that's who's primarily driving it from the customers that we're interacting with.
Yeah. So, Rudy, about management buy-in and cross-functional buy-in, like how do you bring all the people on the table, and how should you be presenting this S/4HANA migration towards management? What is your take on that?
Well, I think the easiest way is always that you start with the bottom line, meaning you look at the business strategy of your clients and which dreams, which aspirations that they would have down the road, maybe for 4 years, and then translate that to an SAP roadmap with emphasis on, for example, creating more uniformization, reducing your TCO through the possibility to have more, how can I say, a better way to work, more condensed way to work, have shorter closings, quarterly closings for your company. Those are things that you can bring forward and you can easily also demonstrate in S/4HANA. But like you said, it's still a rather big investment for a company. And it makes sense that align your business case to integrate S/4HANA to the aspirations or the business strategy of your client. So that's always the way that I continue with clients is which value you're thinking about. How can we bring value? How can we calculate that value being tangible and intangible benefit? So that's the way that I'm trying to sell S/4HANA projects towards the client.
Yep. Thank you. So I will save this question number 6 for now in 5 minutes. So drivers behind the software asset management approach. The question is, so if we are about to migrate to S/4HANA, we need some software asset management. And the question is why, and it doesn't make sense. And how important or not important is it there? And here we have the expert with Rory Canavan with the experience in software asset management. Now, this is like a typical S/4HANA project structure. Probably everyone on this table knows that when you migrate over to S/4HANA, same goes for RISE with SAP. What do you need to look into? You need to look into your contracts architecture. So what is your SAP environment? What have you signed up for? What is your bill of materials? Then, of course, you purchase licenses over the last 20 years. Now you need to understand and evaluate how much of this that I have purchased, that I have in my ownership, the licenses, am I really using? So usage, and how much user licenses will I need in the future? Same goes for engines, for cloud products. So planning the future demand, the projects that are on the table for the next 3 years. Am I planning to implement business intelligence? Am I going for, I don't know, transportation management? Some things that may add to what I have today, and also things that go away that are decommissioned. So as for HANA financial and commercial scenarios, meaning, okay, with this changes that I have users going up or down, engines, some going away, some going up, new engines coming in, what is the financial scenario behind this? Are my costs going up? By how much? And then once you have everything prepared, you move over to the commercial and contractual negotiation. So I remember 10 years ago, when I did projects, we didn't use tools. They were hard to implement, expensive. Now things have changed, and software asset management is almost a commodity. Still not in place for many companies, but it takes a part. And even in this environment of software, of S/4HANA migration, it takes a part. And the question is, how big is this part? And with this, I lead over to Rory to explain to us. So, what are the main issues? First question here is, what is the most important things you should look into to manage your SAP software? And how, Rory, should you dimension this? Now, I have made the experience when you go out to the market and you ask for a software asset management tool implementation project, you can get a proposal that goes from 50K up to 5 million. I'm exaggerating, of course, but the differences are very big. So the question is also what to do and how much to invest in that. How do you decide this? Please, Rory, enlighten us on that.
So thanks, Francisco. And I think rather like people have said already, you know, what you're doing with SAP, you have to have half an eye on what you're doing with SAM as well, and how they interact. So a lot of organizations have a perspective or view of software asset management that we are producing a compliance report at the end of it, where we're waiting for the foot to drop. We're waiting for SAP to come in and to audit us. So we have to be able to demonstrate what we've paid for versus what we have installed, and also then what we've used because of those sort of multiplication factors around calculations of costs. So setting your SAM budget is equally very important as well. You know, do you want to be at that bottom end and pay that 50K? Can you get away with that? Have you got the experience and the staff to be able to generate your own compliance reports? Or are you then going to have to lean on people who have that subject matter expertise, like the August panel that we have in front of us? So that's quite important. But increasingly now, as you go to the cloud, of course, compliance becomes, shall we say, not the burning issue anymore, but value for money. And it was interesting to hear Rudy mention that aspect of TCO. If you have a system like SAP dominating your IT estate, you want to be able to demonstrate, well, we've spent a sizable amount of money getting SAP in, getting it configured, getting it installed. What value is it bringing to the organization having gone through all that work? Because it won't be you know, an easy experience. It is a sort of a 4-year roadmap to get that planned and get it implemented. So that's really then where the future proofing comes in as well, in and around that. Where you are today may not be where you are in 3 to 4 to 5 years time. Company strategy and that whole point too of where the business is going is a complete influence as well, because right now you could be ploughing a trough down a given sector of business, and all of a sudden you decide, well, hang on, there are adjacent sectors to that core line of business that we want to enter into. How do we get SAP into those particular areas as well? So you could be thinking about potentially future-proofing your installation of SAP, so that you've got design aspects considered in sort of year 2, 3, and 4 of potentially a 4-year engagement, rather like Rudy mentioned.
Yes, to complete what you're saying, I was discussing yesterday with Tony what his experience was with other clients doing this process of change, and how RISE is being sold, how S/4HANA is being introduced. And one of the dangers that we are in fact seeing today, now moving to S/4HANA, moving to RISE is a process of change. But to manage change, you must be aware of the components of these changes. And this is something where I sadly see not so much the larger corporations, but mid-sized businesses taking too quick decisions without making use of this change, of this new contract, to analyze what they are really using, to analyze what they need in the future, like to transform their contracts into that maybe a bit outdated in the set of products that they have, the prices that they have, and making use of the situation to get into to change this into something that fits more what they really need. Sorry, I see that the plug in the wall isn't working, so I need to take care of the power with this. Please, Tony, help me out a second to lead into this, the processes for licensing SAP. And Rory, this is your part. Please help me out here, present this part while I take care of the power. Thank you very much.
Okay, good luck with that, Francisco. Sure. So plans rarely, I think there is that expression, X percentage, a very high percentage of plans rarely survive the first engagement. And I think if you have that idea or view that change is the enemy, we could have architected a very sort of specific and given technology stack that has SAP sprawled all over it. But over time, of course, that is going to be subject to change and modification. So understanding the points in a software lifecycle where those changes can actually occur and applying the appropriate degree of management overhead is really quite important. Thank you. That was quite a shock there. For example, in the request process, if we're handing out end user licenses, that we don't sort of run off to the top end and assume that everybody is going to be programming back-end capability into SAP, so we don't issue professional licenses to people who are doing data entry. So making sure that we right-size the right type of license is absolutely vital there. I hope we still have the screen in 5 minutes.
2 minutes.
Another aspect to consider too is our IT asset lifecycle needs to align with our HR lifecycle as well. So we have a joiners, movers, and leavers process. So we really need to, again, go down that communications route and make sure that we say to HR, hey, HR people, if people join or they move or they leave, we have stuff to do as a consequence of that. So please let us know. And it's amazing how many organizations I've been in, that idea of systems access or permissions or equipment even somehow falls through the cracks. That HR assume that service management will pick that up because they'll just know, people will know when they arrive. And equally that thing of moving as well. So if you do go from data entry to coding or requiring greater access into an SAP system, that license needs to change as well and permissions need to change. So get that factored in also. Finally, we're going to, sorry.
A quick addition to that, Rory, on the movers and leavers part, I really like that term, movers and leavers. One thing that customers a lot of times leave out as well, I like that you mentioned the HR component, right? Make sure that you're interacting with HR for employees, but also contractors, right? Because we have contractors come into our SAP systems from, a consultancy or, some sort of third party that come in and they're not in HR, right? So they're not employees. So when they leave, there's no term, for being a part of our organization. And those contractors, we had one customer that we analyzed their users, and they had like, I don't know, 11,000 users more than what they thought they should. And they're like, there's no way. We have this process that when someone leaves, it goes to the SAP system and automatically removes them. Though there's no way there's that many users. And it turned out that it was 4 years of contractors being added and no process for getting rid of them. So I like what you were saying. Just wanted to add that little piece.
Thanks.
Yeah. Sorry, just to add on slightly as well. Sorry to interrupt. I mean, the onboarding and offboarding process is obviously crucial. The classification process as well of users in the old ECC environment. The number of times I've gone into a company, either from an SAP perspective or a non-SAP perspective, and just asked for their classification process, and looked around the room, and everyone's looked at each other because they know there must be one. But of course, there 90% of the time isn't one. But I think everything we're saying here comes back to the fact that it's more than just an IT issue. It's more than a procurement issue. It's more than a technical issue. It's more than the CFO. It's bringing everyone together into this decision-making process. I think whether you're going to S4 on a hyperscaler, whether you're going to RISE, whatever you're doing, making sure that you connect all those dots in that decision-making process, that's what's going to make the success of that exercise for you. And from my perspective, this may be, I'm not trying to promote SAP here, but nor am I trying to denigrate them. This RISE concept, this S/4HANA concept, just like when people move from R3 to ECC, this is a once in a decade experience. SAP is very, very, very focused on getting customers onto S/4, particularly in the cloud, of course. But let's not forget, they need to have customers on S/4. And so this is a once in a decade opportunity for customers, if they embrace it, to really get everything they're looking for from their relationship with SAP. That's how I choose to look at it. If they want to embrace it, then fantastic. We give them the options, yes or no. If the answer is yes, how do we make the most of this exercise? And that comes back to the TCO. It comes back to on-premise. It comes back to cloud. It comes back to everything that we've been talking about, I think, over the last half an hour. So those of you who know me know that I have a tendency to prattle on. If I can say it,
you can hear me again, right?
Yeah, we can hear you, Francisco. Yeah.
That's good. So basically, my charger died. That was the issue. So I had to move to another office. Okay. So going on with this. So SAP license and contract management, and what is software asset management in this environment? Rory, how do you see, what differences do you see between managing this software supplier and managing others? So talking about the biggest budgets on an IT budget today, how big a part is SAP, and how is this different from, I don't know, Microsoft, Oracle, IBM, etc.? What is your take on this, Rory?
My personal take is that if you look at any sort of major player like SAP, IBM, Microsoft, Oracle, anybody who's at the back end, you should, those principles and topics that I covered in the previous slide are applicable to those size and types of systems that, shall we say, govern an enterprise. So think about the footprint of the nature of the software that is at the back office, and then give that the appropriate weight of management attention accordingly. So the favorite analogy I like to give, you don't treat Oracle like you treat WinZip. You know, WinZip has a tiny footprint. You can put that to a tail invariably of a software stack, but SAP is one of those investments that, you know, it's going to be 7, 8, 9 figures potentially. It's absolutely going to be massive over a sort of, you know, a 3, 4, 5 year period. It's got to be a strategic spend in nature. So you want to have a long-term, proper vendor-based relationship with SAP. You want to make sure that it's not a case of, oh God, SAP are at the door, they've come for an audit. You know, how many
you're right. And you know what? Something that to add to what you're saying, I remember like when we started with software asset management years ago, you implemented a tool and then you thought, well, most important thing, I got to cover everything. This tool has to discover everything that we have installed and make sure we are compliant. Now, how far is this important if it is, I don't know, 5 tools that make 80% of your IT budget? Is this really like it is, or am I on the wrong path here? What is the segregation there normally?
I think Sam, as a discipline, has to move on from a matter of compliance anymore, because if you are going to the cloud, that is the thing. If you're going in a sort of an infrastructure as a service model, the provider of that infrastructure already have your money. So that the bill that comes in is the bill you've just paid. And if it's 3 or 4 times bigger than you thought it was, you're doing something wrong. So you're taking the resolution back to the cloud to get that sorted then at that point. It's not a case of, well, let's wait until we true up, or let's wait until we sign a contract. You've got to move, and you've got to move now, because if you don't, if you wait 3 months, that's 3 months of cost savings that have gone out of the door.
I agree.
Sam, at the moment, on-prem Sam is cost avoidance, and nobody in accounting gets excited about cost avoidance. The money's already been spent. Cost savings, however, hang on a minute, you're saving us money spending forward. We can perhaps do something with that money that may not be spent with SAP, or could be spent in a better way or in a different way. And that's something that accountants can work with. So Sam, I suspect as a discipline is and ITAM, because there's hardware factored in there too, is moving towards a discipline of FinOps. And that's possibly one to look up if people haven't given that any thought on the podcast today. And that is cloud cost management. It's demonstrating that value for money against a cloud infrastructure.
Thank you. So another thing that comes to my mind here is I'm getting questioned by many clients. Well, we offer software asset management tools for SAP. We offer consulting services ourselves or with our partners in many countries. So, and clients come and ask, well, what should I be doing myself, and where do I need consultants? And how far are you objective to answer this, being a consultant? So better externalize everything, of course, for my business, but not to the client's advantage necessarily. So you have a more objective view on this, Rory. What do you think, in what areas of what we are seeing on the screen should a client take responsibility, take care of them by himself, and where should he be contracting external workers? Companies?
So I think this falls largely down to the existing workforce that is currently in place. If you've got the skills, talents, and abilities on site or within your FTE headcount, then fine, you can apply yourself to as much of this as you like. But invariably, organizations don't have that level of SAP expertise on site because it's notoriously expensive. It's the same with Microsoft, Oracle, IBM, etc. Having in-house licensing expertise can get quite ruinous to the to the wage structure there. So it's understanding what you're prepared to do. I would actually say the coalface activities, the stepping up and down of services, the adding of new people to systems, etc. That's something that an organization should take charge of. But perhaps the reporting and the analysis and the guidance on strategy, that's perhaps where you start to look at third parties. And we've talked to Rise too, potentially. There's great scope to have an objective pair of eyes come in and actually say, what are you doing with your processes? You know, that's layers of dust potentially that can be added to an organization because they've done things that way, because that's the way we've always done them. To have a fresh pair of eyes come in and actually say, no, there's a better way of working here. And by the way, once you've established that better way of working, let's automate it, let's productize it, then that can help an organization too, because that could actually impact delivery of cash and operations there.
Yeah, I mean, I think to add on to that, of course, and I completely agree with you, but remember that SAP customers often have purchased their licenses 20 years ago. And so what was valid for them 20 years ago, I almost guarantee, well, no, I do guarantee you, is not valid for them now. The people who purchased the licenses 20 years ago have long gone. And even if they understood what they purchased then, and they understood the rationale for why they purchased it, I suggest that in a lot of cases that has disappeared. And the other aspect of this, of course, is that for most businesses, irrespective of their complexity and irrespective of their size and of their expertise, they're only one business. And so by bringing in experts who deal with this all day, every day, from multiple situations, multiple environments, I think there's lots of value in having, I mean, I would say this, of course, but I think there's lots of value in having external expertise. I do agree that the basics, the onboarding, offboarding, the classification processes, all that type of thing should be managed internally. I mean, unfortunately, I mean, Jeremy would know this just as well as I, that we often see that it isn't managed, but that type of thing should be a commoditized process within an organization. But how are they handle everything else is a different issue.
Tony, right, I see that impacting, Tony, is a lot of, I see a lot of organizations in SAM and ITAM offering what they call SAM as a service. In reality, what they're actually offering is compliance as a service. They're offering compliance reporting as a service. So they'll say, this is where you stand with a given vendor, you know, quarter one, quarter two, quarter three, etc. But then driving improvement and driving change, that's something that has to come down to the client to actually do. To say, let's get that compliance report better. That has to sit on the side of the client to realize. It can't be necessarily that, you know, say Francisco is going to go in there with his keyboard and his passwords and start to optimize an SAP solution. You know, there has to be some sort of engagement by the client to understand what's going on behind the infrastructure there.
I think Tony,
go on.
If I can quickly jump in, I think the things that I'm seeing a lot within my client base is that I think it makes sense that you every 3 years you review your IT or your SAP roadmap. What do I mean with this? If you, for example, have a max attention contract and you have your alliance partner of SAP coming along, please prepare like every 4 years or every 3 years an SAP roadmap where you review your business strategy, your current line systems, and also the way that your business is moving to. Because business is not linear, it changes along, how can I say, economic situations, political situations. So it makes sense if you want to save money, every 4 years, review your strategy. And that's where the consultant comes in. It brings a fresh view within your company.
I have experienced some difficulties in the long-term strategy with SAP. As you're saying, mostly clients tend to look into it every 3 to 5 years. But then again, you decide, well, let's implement this this year, and next year we'll go over to, I don't know, customer experience. And I think year 3, then we will have the resources to start our HCM project. So this is totally against the sales strategy of SAP today. Salespeople want to sell today. They want you to pay upfront. They don't believe in long-term procurement plans like we agree in a plan that we agree in today, but the software license will start in 6 months from now, and then the other one in 12 months from now, this third one in I don't know, 2 years. So Jeremy, what is your experience with that? I mean, setting up a midterm strategy with SAP, does it work at all, or do you have to negotiate with them every year, every 6 months, just because they don't agree to starting things in the future and agreeing about them today? What is your experience on that?
Yeah, I mean, SAP definitely has options for customers that want a more structured approach over the use. We've seen plenty of contracts where there's options to opt into, right? So it's a contract that lasts 3-5 years, and there's options that, you know, they hit certain metrics and they can opt into, you know, a particular level of licenses. Those contracts are getting old, as Tony said. I mean, some of those contracts are back in, you know, the early 2000s when those were signed, and some customers are still renewing those year over year or every 3 or 5 years. I would say that those are rare, but it is an option. Customers don't know that it is an option with SAP to have a more long-term view of your contract. Say, look, this is what we want to do over a 3 or 5 year period with SAP, and sign a contract, puts into place, you know, certain metrics and certain markers to help you, you know, basically forecast and plan your license demand over the years.
Yep. So DSAG, the German SAP user group, has been pushing SAP for some years now to allow for more test contracts, so trial versions of the software. One of the things that clients encounter today is, well, we enter now the development phase, product planning phase, analysis phase before we start off going live. Now, in the past, people tended, if possible, to buy a trial version for developing of a trial version of a database, trial version of this and that, etc. Now, going on the cloud, this gets more and more difficult. And as many of you know, many trial versions last a month or 2 months, but this is not enough to develop a system. So what is your approach on that, Tony? What do you think when planning for implementation of bigger systems, let's say CRM system, customer experience systems, success factors? So what is the negotiation approach with SAP? I mean, I don't want to be paying for 10,000 users of success factors when I'm starting to develop today and going live in 1.5 years. What do you think about that?
It's a multifaceted answer, of course. I mean, we all know, any of us who are experienced with SAP know that virtually everything is negotiable. That there are some things that I guess are set in stone, but everything else you can debate. Now, if we go for the on-premise world, deferring maintenance payments, for example, is one thing when you move. On the cloud side, even on the on-premise side, for those of you who are old enough, remember the old phased options. So you could purchase licenses in phases or in steps along the way. And in the cloud space, we're seeing that all the time as well. So you can step up into your full environment over a certain number of years. With regards to pricing, with regards to terms and conditions, I'm afraid to say that is depending on your skill sets as an organization. I've seen tiny customers come out with 90% discounts, and I've seen huge customers come out with 65% discounts. It's just a question of knowing what you can ask for, getting your timing right, knowing what your demands are, knowing what your usage is, making sure that you don't have anything that SAP can use against you in leverage. And unfortunately, we all know that SAP loves to hold audit against some customers. So making sure that you're squeaky clean on that side before you start engaging SAP. These are all parts of the nuances in having that negotiation with SAP. The answer is, simple answer is, Francisco, there are plenty of options. It's just a question of knowing what to ask for and knowing how to push the buttons and pull the knobs and twiddle the levers.
Yeah, totally agree on that. Same experience here with discounts not being dependent on the size of the deal, the size of the client or anything, but just the situation and the expertise of the client. And yeah, I mean, well, what I see today is basically that the further you get away from Germany, and I don't know if you can confirm this around Singapore, but in my opinion, here in America, the further you get from Germany, the more creative on the negative side the salespeople are with SAP in terms of just rejecting everything. So they want the short-term recognition for sales. So a ramp-up approach is always rejected in my experience here, which I have seen in Europe all of the time happening. Clients buying with ramp-up agreements, things like that. But it's important for clients to be aware of that and to be in contact with companies like yours, like mine, to discuss this kind of things. So
just understand that the SAP standard response is no. So once you understand that that's going to be the initial reaction, and that is not the final answer, then you're on the road to recovery.
Yeah. So we have come to our ending. I really must say thank you to all of you. It is such a pleasant thing to talk with people who are on it in the day-to-day business and get to see those things and confirm or not confirm some thesis, some ideas. I think it must be interesting also for those who are not professionals in the licensing area to listen to this. Well, think of our companies, think of Rory, think of Jeremy with Angle Point, think of VOQUZ. When you are about to migrate to S4HANA, consider RISE with SAP. Think of Rudy as one of the top project managers in Europe with his company when you are implementing S4HANA. Just use these resources that you have today, because it is really a way of improving your decisions, of getting the information that you need to make more fundamental decisions with the right data, with the right experience, and very often with short engagements of 1 to 4, 5 months, we can really change totally the perspective on a contract, the quality of a contract, the quality of the commercials of the contract. So use these expert resources in your S4 RISE with SAP adoption process. Thank you very much for listening to us today. Look forward to see you in the next webinars. Please sign up on our LinkedIn and follow us so that you get to know what webinars we are doing. I'm very grateful for all of you speakers today and for the participants. Thank you very much. Look forward to talk to you in the next time. Goodbye for today.
Thanks, everyone.